Documented 187 is a true crime podcast. Today's episode includes discussions of murder, possible drugging, sexual assault allegations, restraint, and other disturbing circumstances surrounding an unsolved death. Listener discretion is advised. You are a seasoned paramedic responding to a frantic 911 call about an intruder and a stabbing. You rush up the stairs of a multi-million-dollar Dupont Circle townhouse, bracing yourself for chaos. You expect blood, panic, furniture knocked out of place, the unmistakable wreckage of a life or death struggle. Instead, you walk into a guest bedroom that feels wrong before anyone says a word. The room is too still. The victim is lying flat on the bed, his arms resting neatly at his sides. The bedding is tucked beneath him in a way that feels almost staged. There is no blood-soaked mattress. The men who live in the house aren't behaving like people who just survived a violent home invasion. Their fear doesn't fit the scene. One thing becomes immediately clear. Nothing about this scene makes sense. As you stand there, taking in the bed, the shirt, the knife, and the heavy silence. A man walked into a house in Washington, D.C., expecting nothing more than a place to sleep. He would never walk out again. The victim was 32 years old in the summer of 2006. By all accounts, he did things with purpose. He was brilliant, driven, and deeply compassionate. A fourth-generation Chinese American raised in Brooklyn. He graduated with honors from the College of William and Mary, then earned his law degree from the University of Pennsylvania. He was devoted to community service and advocacy, especially within the Asian American community. He was married, settled in Oakton, Virginia, and had recently taken a prestigious new job as general counsel for Radio Free Asia. He was stepping into the prime of his life. August 2nd, 2006 was a Wednesday. The victim was working late at his downtown DC office. Facing an early morning meeting the next day, he decided to avoid the long commute back to Virginia and crash on his friend Joe's pull-out couch. He called his wife to let her know the plan.
Hello there.
That choice placed him inside 1509 Swan Street. The home was occupied by three men who lived together in a polyamorous family unit. Joseph Price, an intellectual property lawyer, Victor Zaborski, a marketing executive, and Dylan Ward, a massage therapist. The connection between the victim and the men in the house appeared to be friendly and platonic. He and Joseph Price had known each other for years after meeting at the College of William and Mary. Their lives have gone in different directions, but they remained close enough that when he needed a place to stay in the city, Price's home seemed like a reasonable option. The man who made that choice was Robert Eric Wone. At 9:30 p.m., Robert leaves his office. About an hour later, at 10:30 p.m., he arrives at the Swan Street townhouse. According to the statements provided by Price, Zaborski, and Ward, Robert settles in the kitchen with the others and has a glass of water. The four men chat briefly about his new job. Everything appears normal. Around 10:45 p.m., Robert heads upstairs to the second floor guest room, where a pull-out sofa has been made up for him. He takes a shower and gets ready for bed. The other three men retreat to their respective bedrooms. Price and Zaborski to the master suite on the third floor, and Ward to his bedroom on the second floor, just down the hall from Robert. At 11:08 p.m., Robert checks his BlackBerry and sends a final email to his office. This is the last verifiable moment he is known to be alive. Then between 11:08 p.m. and 11:49 p.m., 41 minutes of unaccounted-for silence pass inside the house. At 11:49 p.m., Victor Zaborski calls 911.
911, what's your emergency, please?
The audio of the 911 call is deeply unsettling because of the contradictory tones. Zaborski sounds frantic, practically hyperventilating as he reports that an intruder has broken into the home and stabbed someone. In the background, Joseph Price speaks in an eerily calm, controlled cadence. When the dispatcher asks whether Robert is breathing, the response is disjointed. There is no sense of a desperate fight to save him, no screaming or visible chaos reaching through the phone, just panic, control, and a cold wait for the paramedics. Jury. If I were the dispatcher, my antennas would have gone up. Because yes, with certain jobs and certain training, you learn how to respond to tragedy with a level of calm. People do that every day. Paramedics, dispatchers, doctors, military, law enforcement. Calm does not automatically mean guilty, but I'm not sure that the same calm will hold if I were standing in the middle of an active emergency and someone bleeding upstairs and a supposed intruder loose in the house. And I'm naturally suspicious of people, so that doesn't help either. Emergency medical technicians arrived about 5 minutes after the 911 call and rushed up the stairs to the second floor guest room. The room did not look like violence had torn through it. Robert was lying flat on his back on a pull-out bed, dressed in a gray William & Mary t-shirt, gym shorts, and underwear. His arms rested at his sides, and the bedding beneath was too neat. There were 3 stab wounds to his chest, clustered tightly together, one of them penetrating straight through his heart. A wound like that should have left blood on his shirt. Blood in the bedding. Blood somewhere beyond the body itself. His skin appeared pale and white. The floor and walls were clean. It just looked controlled. Too controlled. The presumed murder weapon sat on a wooden bedside table, position where investigators could easily find it. The knife had Robert Wone's blood on it, but even that felt strangely convenient, like the room was trying to explain itself. Robert was transported to George Washington University Hospital. Where resuscitation efforts failed, and he was pronounced dead. Back at Swan Street, detectives began separating the story from the scene. Price, Zaborski, and Ward told investigators that an intruder had entered through the back of the house, made his way upstairs, attacked Robert, and disappeared before anyone could stop him. For that version to work, the intruder would have needed to scale the backyard fence, push through thick, thorny bushes, enter the rear of an occupied home, pass through the house without taking valuables, walk past Dylan Ward's bedroom, find Robert in the guest room, stab him silently, leave the knife behind, and escape into the night without leaving any disturbance. The backyard did not support that story. Investigators found no obvious signs of forced entry, no clear trail through the bushes, or evidence that someone moved through the rear of the property in the way the account required. Even the spider web near the exterior rear door appeared undisturbed. And then there were the men inside the house. If they had discovered Robert bleeding and tried to help him, investigators expected some physical sign of that contact. Blood on the hands, clothing, smears of blood where someone leaned over him, touched him, lifted him, pressed a towel against the wound, or did something that looked normal in an emergency. Instead, they appeared unusually clean. Officer Diane Durham later described Joseph Price as wearing only white briefs when she arrived, while paramedic Jeffrey Baker said the men looked freshly showered. Other coverage described the residents as appearing freshly washed and wearing bathrobes. Taken alongside the condition of the bedroom, that detail gave investigators another reason to question whether the scene matched the story they were being told. Inside the police station, the interviews raised more concerns. When the men were placed together in an interview room, the silence between them became difficult to ignore. No one broke down. No one turned to the other and asked what had just happened. No one filled the room with fear or confusion. They sat quietly, aware they were being watched, and gave investigators very little. The intruder theory remained their explanation, but the house kept pushing back against it. When the medical examiner conducted Robert Wone's autopsy, the intruder theory became even harder to accept. Robert had no defensive wounds or cuts on his hands, no bruising on his arms, or evidence that he had fought back against the person who stabbed him. For a healthy, athletic 32-year-old man to suffer 3 clean stab wounds to the chest without raising his hands, twisting away, or leaving behind some sign of resistance, investigators believe something had prevented him from reacting. That theory followed them straight into the autopsy room. There were several unexplained puncture marks on Robert's body, including marks on his neck, chest, foot, and hand. Emergency responders did not account for them, and there was no known recent medical procedure that explained why they were there. The marks raised the possibility that Robert had been injected with something before he was killed, but toxicology did not confirm a paralytic drug or any other substance that could fully explain his lack of movement. Robert was also found wearing the dental guard he used at night to prevent teeth grinding. That small detail supported Robert being done for the day, relaxed, and ready to sleep. The autopsy raised concerns about possible sexual assault. Investigators found Robert's own semen on and around parts of his body, including his genitals, anus, and rectum. Early affidavits described that finding as consistent with some form of sexual assault, but later court discussions showed that experts disagreed over what evidence proves and whether it could be explained by natural post-mortem processes, such as the release or movement of bodily fluids after death. The knife created another problem. Investigators tested the knife, the one presented by the scene, as the obvious weapon. Robert's blood was on it, but forensic experts focused on what else was there and what was missing. Fibers on the knife were linked to a towel from the house, not the gray William and Mary T-shirt Robert had been wearing. Prosecutors argued that the knife had been staged, with Robert's blood wiped onto it to make it look like the murder weapon. Defense experts challenged parts of that interpretation, but investigators continued to believe the real weapon had never been found. The T-shirt raised its own set of questions. Robert's T-shirt had clean slits that lined up with the wounds in his chest, which meant he was wearing it when he was stabbed. But the T-shirt was not stained with the volume of blood investigators expected from wounds that severe. His body appeared unusually clean. The bedding had only limited blood, and the room lacked the physical aftermath of a violent stabbing. From there, police developed a working theory. Robert may have been incapacitated before he was attacked, possibly by a drug that testing failed to detect. They also believed that the scene had been altered before 911 was called. In their view, the missing blood, the clean body, the knife on the nightstand, towel fibers, the puncture marks, and the delay between Robert's last known activity and the emergency call all pointed towards staging. There were too many signs that the scene had been changed and too little evidence to say exactly how, when, or by whom. Proving it in a court of law required tangible evidence. Because the crime scene appeared to have been ruthlessly and officially sanitized, there was a near-complete absence of physical evidence connecting Price, Zaborski, or Ward to the actual physical act of stabbing Robert. The toxicology report, which screened for hundreds of known drugs, came back clean. Experts have noted that some agents can metabolize quickly, leaving little or no trace. Lacking a murder weapon, a confirmed paralytic drug, and undeniable proof of exactly whose hand held the knife, the prosecution hit a brick wall. Joseph Price, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward were never charged with murder. In 2008, prosecutors indicted the three men on charges of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. It was an attempt to hold them accountable for what prosecutors believe happened after Robert was stabbed, even if they could not prove who killed him. In 2010, the men opted for a bench trial, allowing a judge to decide their fate. She stated on the record that it was very likely the men knew more than they told investigators. She ruled the prosecution had failed to prove exactly what happened in that house beyond a reasonable doubt. She found all 3 men not guilty on all counts. They walked out of the courthouse as free men. The following year, Robert's widow, Kathy Wone, pursued a $20 million wrongful death civil lawsuit against the 3 men. Before the trial was set to begin, the 3 men settled with Kathy out of court for an undisclosed sum. They never admitted fault or changed their story. To this day, officially and legally, the murder of Robert Wone is an unsolved cold case. Jury. In the shadow of this grotesque legal puzzle, let's give Robert Eric Wone his flowers. A brilliant man, a devoted husband who loved his wife deeply, and an accomplished attorney. A beloved son, mentor, and a man whose brightest years were violently and savagely stolen from him. Robert deserved a long, beautiful life. At the very least, he deserved the truth. And it remains a profound, lingering tragedy that his family is still waiting for it. Until next time, slide into the shadows.